I'm Rick Munn. This is No Risk, No Reward Media. Welcome back, everyone. And for those of you who are joining for the first time, also, you're very, very welcome. I'm joined this morning by Mr. Tont Brady. Tony is the father of Aaron Brady, who is currently incarcerated in Portlaoise Prison, serving a 40-year prison sentence for the capital murder of an Irish police force member. Aaron has appealed or attempted to appeal via his family this conviction. The appeal has been rejected, and now I want to speak to Tony this morning about the background of this case, the appeal process, and what may lie ahead. So welcome, Tony. How are you doing?
I'm very good, Rick. Thank you, and thank you so much for giving us Aaron's campaign some airtime with your podcast. Thank you.
No, you're very, very welcome. And let me make this very clear. Tony has done a lot of presentations over the years. I will put a link in the description box underneath this video just to long form presentations on the appeals grounds for this case, the background of this case. So check the description box underneath the video for a deep dive into the background of this case. But I want to get an overview. I want you to give me an overview of this case, Tony, for maybe people that aren't aware of it, what the background is, the position with Aaron at the minute, and a little bit about the recent appeals that have happened over the last 6 to 12 months.
Thank you, Rick. Yes, well, Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe was shot and murdered sort of during a botched robbery at Lordship Credit Union on the 25th of January 2013. Lordship Credit Union, it's just south of the border, just outside Dundalk on the Cooley Peninsula. From actual CCTV footage, we know for a fact that 4 men jumped across the wall at the back of the credit union. 2 of the men were armed, one with a shotgun, one with a handgun, approached the Garda car, and the other 2 raiders attacked 2 cars belonging to the credit union workers. As the credit union convoy was leaving the car park, the entrance was blocked. Garda Donohoe exited the passenger door of the Garda vehicle to check what was happening. As the raiders attacked from the opposite side of the vehicle, a shotgun was fired across the roof of the car, and Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe was instantly murdered. The 4 raiders made a getaway. They jumped into a silver Passat and sped off towards Dundalk. So that's what happened. That was in 25th of January 2013. In May 2017, Aaron was arrested in New York. So what had happened in between that, there was an extensive media coverage of obviously the murder. Mm-hmm. And there was pixelated photographs and articles sort of relating to Aaron in all the mainstream media here in Ireland. And it became very difficult sort of for Aaron. It was uncomfortable for Aaron living locally here. And he went to America. So he had made a life in America. He was working in construction. He was actually working with a young man from Tyrone, and they're in the process of starting their own business, pile driving business in the construction industry in New York. So he was arrested on the 17th of May. He was brought home to Ireland, and we finished up at Aaron's trial began on the 8th of October 2019. And we had always thought up along, although we were very, very concerned, but we always thought at each juncture that it wouldn't go any further because there was no gang. There was no men linked to Aaron that could be linked to the car park. We knew, for example, some of the evidence. The man who shot Adrian Donohoe was 6'1" or 2", as was described by Adrian Donohoe's colleague, Detective Joe Ryan, who had the unfortunate event of having to face both gunmen. Mm-hmm. So we always thought it was, I suppose we sort of nearly believed this was some sort of a ruse to smoke out the real killers. Mm-hmm. But as the case continued, there was a lot of legal argument, October, November, December 2019. And this legal argument was in relation to the American witnesses. And this is the central part to Aaron's trial, the American witnesses, because the circumstantial evidence, as stated by the prosecution on Garda Síochána and Irish DPP themselves, the circumstantial evidence was very, very weak. And we have proven over this last 4 years and 500 videos that evidence was tampered with. And we've called the authorities out on this, and we've publicised it. And as I said to yourself, Rick, it's never been picked up by the Irish mainstream media. A total ban on the Justice for Aaron Brady campaign. So the circumstantial evidence led nowhere. So Aaron was convicted on the hearsay evidence of 2 people in particular. One was a Daniel Cahill, a barman from Dublin, who was working in New York. Now, we've done, again, extensive videos on the background of Daniel Cahill, his involvement with the Real IRA, the Ray and crew. It's all documented, and it was discussed in court. This was discussed in front of the jury. And the second witness, a young girl, a US citizen with Irish heritage. She was actually a girlfriend of one of Aaron's friends when Aaron was living in just off McLean Avenue in Woodlawn. And this young girl was given evidence that she had heard Aaron in a rant one day saying that he had shot a cop. Now, this young girl, we've always described her, she was a vulnerable young lady. She would have been taking prescription medication. She needed medication. And during her testimony, because Aaron's trial took place during COVID, she was allowed to give evidence from her kitchen in New York to the CCJ in Dublin, and she was the main witness in a capital murder trial. So that in itself deprived Aaron of his human rights of facing his accuser. But again, the Irish judicial system let that roll. But during the course of Miss Staunton's testimony, she was attacked. Now, she had given very straightforward agreement that she would be in an isolated area where no one else had access to her, and she would give evidence on her own, just as I'm speaking to you now today, in front of her laptop. But it became apparent quite early on that there was something happening in the background, and also Miss Staunton's phone, well, we believe it's a phone. For those of you who go and watch the videos later, you can see that Miss Staunton's engaged with another appliance. It's actually down to her right-hand side. And you can see that she's actually reading the screen. So we do believe she was getting messages. But notwithstanding that, she was attacked by an unknown male called Seamus during the course of a trial. Some of the things that were shouted at her was, tell them what you're supposed to tell them. Don't say anything till you have your lawyer. And we were very lucky in so far as Miss Staunton got up, walked around behind the laptop, and you could hear there actually was sort of physical altercation, and the laptop was slammed down and the screens in the courtroom went black. But luckily, the sound was still being recorded, and it gave us a flavour of what was actually happening. She says, my life depends on this. He's saying, tell them what you're fucking supposed to tell them. So this went on, and obviously after
this is a witness testimony in a capital murder case. So what you're describing sounds like a domestic happening, which happens, but this was during a witness testimony via video link from New York that ultimately was partially responsible for the conviction of your son for capital murder.
Yes, very much so. And I think we were just speaking about before we came on, Eric, we only seen it on that day, and it was very confusing. And indeed, the way the narrative was played out for the first afternoon after that happened was the finger was very much being pointed at the Bradys. But then as the matter was being discussed, by both sets of barristers, it became apparent that this was a male acquaintance of Miss Staunton's, and amazingly, the Irish authorities, the DPP, lead prosecutor Brendan Graham, told the court and told the jury that the Irish Garda would not be investigating the incident that took place during Maureen Staunton's testimony. And that this was, as you rightly said, some form of a domestic, and that the person was known to Miss Staunton, and obviously it was nothing got to do with Aaron Brady or the Brady family. And the judge, Michael White, did issue a statement that he would put a health warning, is the way it was described, on Miss Staunton's evidence when it came to his discharge of the jury. But what he had told us in the absence of the jury, and what he actually done, what he actually said in the discharge of jury, was miles apart. He just barely acknowledged that a witness had been attacked during her testimony. So this is sort of the basis of where we are with Aaron's campaign. We've highlighted the case should have been thrown out, and on that day, on that moment, when it had been established that obviously this was absolutely nothing got to do with the Bradys. This girl had been compromised. She had purged herself, and during the course of her testimony, she actually said more times. She actually said Aaron didn't say, "I shot a cop." She said that more times than she did say Aaron did say he shot a cop. And I suppose for a little bit of context, Aaron did go into a rant on a Pacific day, the day Molly Staunton is talking about. Members of Garda Síochána called to Aaron's girlfriend, now wife, who were living in Kerry, and told them all sorts of things about, they said I was head of IRA in South Armagh, had commissioned several murders and involved in several murders, and Aaron Brady definitely shot Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe. Obviously, these parents in Kerry were contacting their daughter and to get as far away from this evil person as you can. Get away from Aaron Brady, get away. And obviously, Aaron's girlfriend said, rang Aaron and told him what had happened, and he flipped. Now, Aaron had gone through a lot of what the media had done, pixelated
Photos,
pictures of him in the newspapers, and they're quite obviously, you wouldn't have to be a detective to see who it is. It's quite obvious who it is. And so there was a rant, and I'm sure Aaron was effing and blinding on Garda Síochána and what they had done, but he never said in that room that he had shot anyone. And I suppose this is a good time to put in the caveat that the Gardaí had questioned, bullied people and bribed people to say that Aaron Brady had said these things, that Aaron Brady had said, "I shot the cop, I shot a guard, I shot Adrian Donohoe." Well, the caveat and the cornerstone of our campaign is that is physically impossible. We have CCTV footage and stills which show clearly that the man who shot Adrian Donohoe is 6'1", 6'2", 6'3". Aaron Brady is 5'7". So any suggestion that Aaron Brady, even if he did say these things, it wouldn't make any sense, because it is physically impossible for Aaron to have been that man there, the man who shot Adrian Donohoe. So, and to strengthen that, we now have the CCTV footage of the 4 raiders. So the man with the handgun is about 5'8", 5'9". The man who attacked Bernadette, the credit union worker's car, he is 5'11", 6 foot, with a Dublin accent. And the man who attacked Pat Bellew, who would have been the chairman of Lordship Credit Union, that raider is approximately 6 foot. And again, we can tell all these because we have anchor points from the actual height of the cars and the height of the open doors of the relevant vehicles. So it is physically impossible for Aaron Brady to have been one of the raiders in Lordship Credit Union car park. So,
But he's the
what we
one. He's the one that's in Portlaoise at the minute, charged with this murder, and no
yes,
other people have been tried and found guilty. It's basically all on him.
on Aaron. And Brendan Graham, on a number of occasions, pointed at Aaron Brady. He says, Aaron Brady, you are the man who shot and murdered Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe. Aaron Brady, you pulled the trigger. And like we are, obviously, our mantra is Brendan Graham, Senior Prosecution Counsel, had access to enhanced video footage. And they all know, everyone in the courtroom, particularly during when we move on to Aaron's appeal, everyone in the courtroom knew. Everyone involved in this case knows. And that's going from Adrian Donohoe's colleagues, Adrian Donohoe's the prosecution team, the DPP, every politician in the Dáil in the Republic of Ireland know that Aaron Brady cannot be the man who shot Adrian Donohoe. So, as you say, Aaron is the only person incarcerated. There is no gang existed. And I suppose we go into the reasons why Aaron was picked out. I do believe there was a complete mess made of the investigation in the very early stages. And they just picked on Aaron because I suppose we have to go into the detail of the beginning of the case. Aaron's friend, who was also initially named as a suspect but has since been acquitted of the murder and robbery, lived quite close to the credit union. So 6 hours after the murder and robbery, Aaron left Northern Ireland here. He was involved in illegal activity at the time of the murder and robbery. Aaron was involved in diesel laundering here on the border. And he was in a yard loading cubes of diesel onto a curtain cider at the time of the murder and robbery. So he left with his friend in Northern Ireland, drove up to the outer cordon of the area where the murder had taken place. And Aaron actually got out of the car, moved the cones, drove into the inner cordon. And that is where the left turn was into James, his friend's house. Spoke to members of Garda Síochána and drove into James's house, and they stayed there that night. So we have to believe that these two young men were after murdering a member of Garda Síochána, made their getaway, made a good getaway, got across the border, let's say, and amazingly, we have to believe that they drove back into the Republic of Ireland, drove into the inner cordon, and stayed within 2 kilometres of the murder scene. So the following morning, Aaron and James are leaving the house, and actually Aaron said to James, he said, drive up through Ravensdale, don't go down through all the yards, and it's a load of nonsense. And James says, no, we'll go down and see what's happening. So they're driving up through, there's hundreds of guards obviously searching along the roadway, and search teams everywhere. Drive up to the roundabout, guard a checkpoint, they're stopped, and Aaron's asked, where were you last night, Aaron? So Aaron says, I was in my girlfriend's house from 7 o'clock until 11. Now, the truth of the matter is, Aaron was in a diesel yard from just before 7 o'clock until 11 o'clock. And then he was in his girlfriend's house. So, obviously, when this was checked out, excuse me, this was a lie. And this is what hung the whole case against Aaron Brady. Aaron Brady was a liar. And again, when we dig down into that lie, Aaron and James are in the house for 8, 9, 10 hours, and they obviously have 15 hours after the murder and robbery, and they had no alibi. They had nothing made up. So Aaron came up to the checkpoint. He was asked, where were you? He says, I'm at my girlfriend's house. So for that to hold any water as an alibi, Aaron would need his girlfriend's best friend, his girlfriend's sister, his girlfriend's mum, his girlfriend's dad, and his girlfriend's brother all to corroborate that Aaron was in the house from 7 till
Yeah.
11. So, and that is amazingly how that it all unravelled when they made such a mess of the initial investigation. The only thing they had, probably in May 2013, and I can see this because I've read over 4,000 statements, and you can sort of see in April and May there's a change in the pattern of the questioning and who and where the Garda you're talking to, and they've made a mess of it. And the people who did commit this murder and robbery had dispersed, they were gone, and there was no trace of them.
Okay.
So that's, I hope that's not too convoluted.
No,
but
it's
that
not.
that
It's
is
not.
how Aaron's name got, how his hat was hung on the hanger.
Well, again, for anybody that's picking this video up now, if you haven't been watching it from the start, there's extensive presentations done for all the details in this case. The link will be below in the description box for this video, and also a link through to the website, justiceforaaronbrady.com. You can go there if this is your first time knowing about this or hearing about this. This is just to give an overview of what the background is, which I believe that we've done now. And that everything that you talked about resulted in a capital murder conviction for your son Aaron, who's currently serving a 40-year sentence in Portlaoise prison. It was appealed, however, because some of the things that you touched on, and one of them in particular that's been written about extensively, even in the reports that came out in the mainstream media about the appeal, was to do with this, well, what would certainly look to a passerby, I would imagine, as an unsound witness testimony. And by the way, I'm no legal expert, not in the slightest, but even in the reporting on this, for example, one of the key witnesses against Aaron was Molly Staunton, provided to be a key witness. They both testified that they heard Aaron admitted to killing a guard or a cop while he was in the United States. Due to COVID restrictions in New York, ad hoc arrangements were made for them to give evidence via video link. So this is not something that you're making up. This is actually reported in the mainstream media. Mr. Justice Edwards said that these arrangements, quote, may not have been ideal, but were not an error per se. So not ideal. I don't know if anybody out there that's listening has ever been on jury service. I was on jury service a couple of years ago. It was a pretty serious case. And the concept of a witness being called into the courtroom, and while they're in the courtroom having an argument with a third party, or looking at a phone, or somebody whispering in their ear, do what you would have told you to say, the whole thing would have been halted immediately. That's a fact. I can't imagine any circumstance where that would be allowed if there was an in-person testimony. So the principle, I would have thought, would have applied to the video testimony, given that you also said that the requirements were, okay, well, if you can't come to Ireland and there's restrictions on and we don't want people travelling, you set up on your own, you set up in a secure space, it's just you and the camera talking directly to the court in a capital murder trial. But that's not what happened. And admittedly, the arrangements may not have been ideal. Well, I'd have thought if there was one thing you wanted ideal arrangements for, it would be a case with this amount of gravity behind it. So correct me if I'm wrong, that was one of the main points with which you wanted to appeal this conviction. And I'm just summarising this, and then I'm going to throw it back to you.
Yeah.
There were 48 highlighted. 48. So we're just talking about this one, but there were 48 issues that you believe would have been grounds of appeal that your legal team put forward, and all 48 were dismissed by the courts, which meant that effectively, and via the Supreme Court, that there is no more grounds for appeal for Aaron's case in Ireland at the minute. Is that accurate?
Yes, that covers it. In the summer of last year, we went through the appeal. It's the longest appeal in the history of the Irish state, as was the trial. The appeal lasted over 7 days, 48 points of appeal. I'd have to admit, a lot of those are GDPR things, CCTV footage. But there was at least 12 or 14 we felt automatic retrials. And obviously Molly Staunton was up there at the pinnacle, the apex of those. But Judge Edwards came in on the day of the decision. 17 minutes it took to give the decision. He said he wouldn't read out the appeal. And again, I think even in the memory of Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe, that would have been the proper thing to do. If it took 2 or 3 hours to read it out, so be it. We were after taking 7 days to hear the appeal several months earlier. It took almost 12 months to host the trial. And I think in the interest of fairness for everyone and in the interest of the memory of Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe, he should have read out the results and the decisions. And obviously, we are seeing, and we stand to be corrected, the reason why Judge Edwards and his 2 assistant judges didn't is simply because it was too embarrassing. Now, I am not sure, I should have checked, Rick, in the meantime. Up until just before Christmas, the appeal decisions was not available on courts.ie. Now, we had it and we made it available. If people sent us their email address, we had emailed it out. We emailed it to numerous people. But up until just before Christmas is the last time I checked Aaron's appeal. And by law, it should be available to the public.
Yeah.
So that, again, it gives some insight to what it is. Like, it's just a kangaroo situation. It's just a total cabal that we are dealing with. So 48 points of appeal. Judge Edwards came in, 17 minutes. Aaron Brady, everything that happened in your court case was fine. And the irony behind all this, again, just touching on little bits of detail, Aaron was actually charged with the theft of a blue Passat. And this blue Passat was allegedly used in the Modern robbery. And the only 2 eyewitnesses to the vehicle that blocked the entrance to the car park was said that it was silver or grey. And the irony is, as Judge Edwards, like we've done earlier, give a brief overview of what happened at the car park, he actually said a grey Passat pulled across the gateway and blocked the entrance. Mm-hmm. So, like, at every turn, every step, and I promise this, if anyone goes and checks out Aaron's campaign, we've created over 500 videos, done numerous podcasts, lives, and not once, not one paragraph, not one line has been contradicted by either the mainstream media or the Irish authorities. And it's things like this. Everyone knows it was a silver or grey Passat that was used, and yet the narrative used by the prosecution to fit their narrative, they had to generate and make up this blue Passat. And it's just, there's scores, absolutely scores of inaccuracies with the circumstantial evidence. As you said, Rick, the circumstantial evidence was particularly weak, and that brings us on then to the American aspect of it. And you've explained perfectly what happened with Molly Staunton. The case should have been stopped immediately when the attack happened on the witness.
So in a complete summary of all this then, the conviction was really secured according to the reporting again, and this was done by the mainstream, who immediately describe Aaron as number 1, pathological liar, number 2, Garda killer, pathological liar, Aaron Brady, not Aaron Brady, pathological liar, and Garda killer. They got to get the descriptive terms in there first.
Yes,
so they're painting that picture there. But even their reporting says that it was various strands of circumstantial evidence were used to prove guilt at the trial in 2020. And it really hung on the testimonies of 2 people who claimed that they heard him say, or they admitted
Yes.
that he did this. Okay, and then the other main sort of physical side of this is this poster that's behind you, to your left side, I think it is, showing that the shooter, according to the person that was in the car with the man that ultimately was shot, his
Yes.
testimony said that the shooter was at least 6'1", but could have been 6'2", 6'3", but let's say at least 6'1".
Oh, yeah.
And your son Aaron is a shade under 5'7", or maybe
Yeah.
there and thereabouts. So there's a big difference there as well, and that's coming again from the man that was in the car with Adrian Donohoe, that was unfortunately
Yeah.
shot and murdered and killed that day. So that's really what this all rides on. And let me ask you a question here, because I'm sure there'll be people listening to this who are thinking this themselves, right? So you're coming on and you're speaking very passionately and you're speaking very clearly. You obviously know this case inside out. You're his dad. Your family's behind him. Why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't
Yeah.
you spend years trying to defend your son? Sure, any father would do that. But after a conviction, such a grave conviction, and then it being overturned at appeal, do you really think he's innocent?
Yes, very much so. We've always known Aaron was innocent now. And in our very first video we released back in October 2020 in Aaron's campaign, we always said Aaron was no angel. He was involved in diesel laundering, and but he was doing his apprenticeship as an electrician, and he was working as an electrician, messing about with the diesel. Aaron was no angel. We've never set out to put wings on him. But if Aaron had to have anything, and I mean anything, not only this accusation that he actually pulled the trigger and murdered Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe, if Aaron had anything to do with the murder and robbery at Lordship Credit Union, myself and my family would not be embarking on what we're doing now. Most certainly not. We would obviously we'd stand by Aaron and
Yeah.
as our son, and we would walk off quietly into the sunset,
Yeah.
and deal with it as best we could. But we can state categorically, we can show it, and we've never gone into the personal aspect of it. We only one journalist, a journalist from Newry, done an article on us in the very early stages, and they wanted to do the bit with myself and Caroline sitting on the couch holding hands and crying, but that was never our intention. We've although it is an emotional
course.
an emotional situation we find ourselves in, we have the facts, we have the details, and we definitely do want that emotion. We do want people to feel empathy for everyone involved, both us and indeed the Donohoe family, and of course Adrian Donohoe. And this is the whole thing. Aaron Brady did not, could not, and physically impossible for Aaron to have been the man who shot Adrian Donohoe. And we'll repeat once.
On a personal level, right? Set aside this case, because when I first spoke to you, I didn't really know much about you. I knew of the case. I wasn't really aware of the details on it. I'm still picking up more information as I go along. But I tried to put myself into your shoes, all right? And I'm a father. I have a one daughter. And irrespective of what she ever does in her life, if she ever, God forbid, did murder somebody, I wouldn't like to think that it would disown her. She's still my daughter. I love her with all my heart. But I wouldn't defend her, or when I knew she was guilty of something, or at least there was a very, very strong possibility that she was guilty of murdering another human being, to put myself out there with the rest of my family for years, trying to put forward a lie as being true. So, when I thought about this, that's what, as a father, I was thinking myself, and I can't say I've never met you. I've no vested interest in this, genuinely. But as a human to human, I'm thinking, I can't see why you would be knocking yourself out for years with your family and going through all this if you actually didn't believe with all your heart that your son was innocent.
Yeah, well, this is true. We believe Well, we know Aaron is innocent. We know Aaron had nothing to do with the death of Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe. And I suppose the caveat again to that is we have put ourselves out there. We've put ourselves front and centre as much as is possible. We have put ourselves forward to all the mainstream crime journalists in Ireland. Um, uh, Owen Reynolds, Paul Reynolds, Schiller, Ali Bracken, all the top journalists. We've offered to go and do what I'm doing with you today, sit and be questioned and be grilled, if you like. Any question, and we've done numerous live podcasts where we invite people, the public, to ask questions and that's been very good because as we go over the case, there's little nuggets that we sort of nearly miss. There's little nuances or little bits of information people will ask about it. So I suppose the thing here is 500 videos, lives, whatever. No one has contradicted one paragraph of what we said. No one of authority has put their head above the parapet and said what Tont Brady and his family are doing is absolutely disgusting in the memory of Detective Garda Adrian Donohoe, that they are trying to defend the indefensible, let's say, that they are belittling the memory of a man who lost his life in his line of duty. So we've been able to stand proud, hold our heads up and say, this is what we are saying. This is the truth. And if anyone wants to contradict that, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, we know Aaron had nothing to do with the murder and robbery at Lordship Credit Union. And we repeat once again, well, I know if Aaron had anything to do with it, even on the outskirts of this horrific crime, we wouldn't be involved in this campaign.
No, I don't
putting
think
our
so.
lives on hold for it.
Yeah. Let's look at then what options are now available to you, because it would have been a kick in the teeth that the appeal was dismissed, in that it shuts the door now for any further legal recourse to be done in the Republic of Ireland. So effectively, he's going to have to serve out the remainder of that sentence. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they said he's going to have to serve at least 30 years before he's eligible for parole.
Yes, yeah.
But depending on what happens between now and then, he still has an awful long time to do in there. And if he doesn't get the parole, it could go up to 40 years. It's an awful long time. Not to be able to question this again with the stuff that you already have accumulated, these grounds for appeal. What next then? What do you do, or where can you go? Or I'm asking you this. I don't believe this to be the case, but I'm asking you this. Are you wasting your time because this has been shut down completely? Because if the Irish courts aren't going to deal with it, what are the British courts going to do? What are the American courts going to do? What's some lawyer going to do from outside of Ireland if the Irish courts have shut the door and nailed it shut when it comes to this case?
Well, they've definitely attempted to do that. There's no doubt about that. The Irish authorities and the Irish state have attempted to do that, and to all intents and purposes, Aaron has exhausted his legal pathway in the Republic of Ireland. We do move on to Europe, the European Court of Appeal. That paperwork has been put forward by Aaron's legal team. Again, we're not overly optimistic on it, I suppose is the best way. We have to be blunt about these things. So we are very much focusing our attention now the outside of the Republic of Ireland. I suppose we have to bring up the case of the Birmingham 6 Guildford 4, where we had MP Chris Mullen get involved. He looked at the evidence, and through his leverage and knowledge he had and his contacts, he reactivated the case, and ultimately we know the outcome there. Yeah. And it's an outcome we want to achieve. We're working very much in Northern Ireland. We have contacted all the political parties, for example. Aaron had a British passport. He's a British citizen. Now, there's vast swathes of the investigation and the case which involves people from Northern Ireland in Northern Ireland. Again, without going into too much specifics because we want to get an overview, but we've had a situation where an American agent who was seconded to the British Embassy in London approached a then suspect. This happened in 2017 in Belfast Airport, and offered that suspect, he says, give us Brady and you'll probably never hear from us again. So we have a tape of that and a transcript of that interaction. So that very much involves obviously the PSNI, the Northern Ireland authorities, and the UK government. So we've appealed to all those. Again, very disappointing in the response thus far, but like everything else, it'll be continuous. I think I sent you an example, Rick. We've contacted Baroness O'Loan in the House of Parliament, obviously because of her knowledge of the workings of Northern Ireland and the contacts she would have. So what we are looking for is any political party to look at this and say, well, there's definitely something here that we're not happy with, and make representation to the Irish part of the Dáil in Ireland, and put some leverage on an Irish TD to question the Ministry for Justice and say, well, this is obvious, there's something wrong here. There is a possibility of new evidence. The 1993 Act, section, I'm going to say section 6, but I think I'm incorrect there. But it's the 1993 Act, new evidence if anyone wants to look at it. And within that, there are vehicles where new evidence or evidence that the convicted person or the convicted person's legal team, legal representatives, did not see as relevant or did not acknowledge the significance of that evidence at the time of the trial or the appeal. So that's very much where we would like to take someone from England or someone from America and use that act to get Aaron back into court. If we get a retrial, that's why they shut the retrials down completely. If we get a retrial, the case won't last 2 days.
Yeah.
We'll absolutely blow it out of the water, and we'll have Aaron back home here with us.
That what you just mentioned there about the new evidence. So when I was trying to do a summary, that the appeal process has been exhausted based on what is currently been presented. That could be overturned if you want, if something came in that was hugely significant to the case and could blow it out of the water in a space of 2 to 3 days. That would mean then that those doors would open again in the Republic. Is that correct?
That's correct. But because we're fighting the state at this stage, Rick, so obviously when Aaron is released, the issue we have here, a lot of the work we create is sent directly to An Garda Síochána, GSOC. We've made representation to the American Embassy in Ireland, the American Embassy in London. So there is no authority that has some sort of a vested interest or have been involved, their organisation has been involved in some way. None of them can plead ignorance. None of them. They've all been made aware of it. They've all been invited to speak with us, the Brady family, so we can table our grievances and show the evidence we have, and we stand to be contradicted on anything we put forward, but no one has been brave enough yet, shall we say, to contradict or come forward and say the Justice for Aaron Brady campaign is incorrect. So trying to get it activate that 1993 Act solely with ourselves and our legal team, I think it'd be shut down. The same thing would happen again. Another Judge Edwards would come forward and say, we've looked at this and we think that everything was above board and everything was satisfactory and the conviction is safe. But if the eyes of the world or the eyes of an outside body are involved, I think that would make a great difference, because now that we're, and I'm not saying we're braver, now that we have more knowledge, now that we're not afraid of the system, we're not afraid of these people. There was days in the courtroom, in Aaron's courtroom, there was 60 members, guards, detectives, and we could stand and face any of them. I held the door open for these people on numerous occasions, and very, very, very few of them could look me in the eye. They're looking down at their shoes, and we've had no real altercations with them, but, I've said, nice shoes.
Yeah.
And none of them met them on the stairs, met them in the canteen, in the CCJ, and none of them. Now, if they're in little groups, they can be a bit smoky and smart
Yeah.
and smarmy, but individually, not one of them
Nobody will open
looked
their
me in
peak.
the eye.
Let me ask you one more question. So you mentioned earlier on, about halfway through this discussion, that you had approached various crime correspondence journalists from more mainstream sources. People, that's what they do for a living. They write about crime. They go into
Yeah.
court cases and whatnot. You hadn't had any joy from them. You've written to Baroness O'Lone. It's still early days from that. You're still waiting
Yeah.
to hear back from that. You've approached 4 political parties in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Can I name them?
Yes, oh yeah, definitely.
So
Yes,
you've
yeah.
approached the DUP, the
Yes.
Democratic Unionist Party, the SDLP,
Yes.
Sinn Féin, and the Alliance Party. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. Yes, yeah.
Right. And again, is it early days with that? They haven't acknowledged or came back to you on that, or has there been
Nothing
any?
nothing substantive. I think the SDLP just came back and asked for confirmation that Aaron had a British passport.
Right.
So, but we every 2 to 3 weeks we'll follow up on that again.
Yes.
And then if you follow Aaron on Facebook in particular, we then publish those letters and the interactions we've had with them. And I suppose in the mainstream media, we have contacted the Nolan Show, the BBC, Aileen Mina, and a number of people came to us and said Aileen Mina was an interesting journalist that was interested in investigating. I do believe she's created some content for Panorama or whatever. Contacted Aileen, contacted Irish News, Belfast Telegraph. Very disappointed with the Irish News. And Connolly Young, I hope not, but this happened, and I've broadcast it before. Initially, our very first launch of the Justice for Aaron Brady campaign was in a local bar just down the road here in the little function room. I give nearly a 3-hour presentation, PowerPoint presentation. I think somewhere in the region of 84 to 86 PowerPoint slides, and that was in October 2020. And Connolly Young was there, and Connolly knows I've been public and saying, and he has probably been restricted by those above him, and I understand that. But of those 86 slides, see everything we said that night, every word of that stands through 4.5 years later. And obviously we've articulated that to the Irish News and to Connolly, but not even an acknowledgement. So, and we've given them the picture of the man who shot Adrian Donohoe. When you can see it clearly, there's the man there, he's 6'3", and there's a little picture of Aaron, 5'7", there in the middle.
Yeah.
So the man who shot Adrian Donohoe is taller than me. So that's just, so the newspapers, the media, our politicians, all, and it is quite exasperating sometimes, and people can't believe it. Well, you've given them this. Well, they're not. So, as I said, all these people know there's no excuses. Nobody can say they didn't know about the Justice for Aaron Brady campaign, that they didn't know about the irregularities and the questionable evidence. So, we're talking about Garda commissioners, ministers for justice, numerous assistant Garda commissioners, and obviously GSOC, the DPP in Ireland, top prosecution counsel Brendan Graham. It is a fairly extensive roll call of people who are fully aware that my son Aaron has been framed. They're fully aware of it. There's no middle ground.
Yeah.
No, there
grey
is
area.
no ambiguity. Yeah, there is no grey area. Yeah.
No grey area. Well, you know what? I'll tell you one thing, that if you get the desired outcome, that there is a retrial or that more evidence comes in and Aaron is released, all the people that are blanking you now, they'll be beating your door down to
Yeah.
get the scoop on on the lowdown behind it.
I
So,
don't think that will be happening.
well,
Uh,
you never
no.
know. That's the way it goes. But when people and here's the problem with mainstream media, generally speaking, or legacy media, they are on a payroll of someone
Yes.
somewhere. So if I was working for a newspaper, for example, or I was working for a state broadcaster, I'll be told you don't cover that, you don't acknowledge that, or maybe you do. I'll get orders from
Yes.
someone, and they'll get their orders from someone. And if I don't comply, well, then I don't get paid, or I get
Yeah.
sacked and I get blacklisted, so I keep my mouth shut.
Shut. Yeah.
But I suppose you would say at the minute anyway, I'm fortunate in that. Who's going to tell me what to do?
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of anybody, and I don't answer to anybody when it comes to this. And I believe, Tony, with all my heart, with everything in life, that the truth can withhold scrutiny,
Yes.
lies can't. And the very fact that you've amassed so much videos, you've done so many presentations, and absolutely nobody has been able to contradict any of what you've said to me shows that you've been scrutinized and you've
Yes.
been
Yeah.
looked at and examined, and nobody can come forward and put their head over the parapet to say, actually, you're wrong about that, or that's a liar, you're lying about that. Nobody's done it yet, which I think speaks volumes in and of itself. So maybe somebody's listening to this today. I don't know who's listening to this. These things can go all over the place. It's amazing
Yes.
the
Yes.
spread with social media now on different platforms. Maybe somebody will pick up on this that can shed more light on it, or that can exert an influence on it, that can get what you're campaigning for, which is justice for your son, Aaron Brady. So check the description box underneath this video. There'll be a link through to the website, but if you're watching it, you'll probably see it on those posters behind Tony's head. It's www.justice4 number 4 Aaron with two A's aaronbrady.com. All the accumulated background to this is on that website, so please feel free to check that out. And who knows, we'll be keeping an eye on this. If there are any more developments for it, you can let me know, and certainly I'll do whatever I can to at least put
Thank you.
forward what has been found, and then people are free to look into it or
Yes.
not, or draw to their own conclusion or not. I'm simply just setting it out there for people to have a look at it themselves. So I appreciate your time this morning, and I really do. And yeah, let's see what happens. Give it time and let's see what happens. But in the meantime, big thanks to you this morning, Mr. Tony Brady. And for now, I'm Rick Munn. This is No Risk, No Reward Media, over and out.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you.